Welcome everyone, it's June 26th and I hope everyone is doing well. We move towards July 4th holiday here in the US, and a couple of things as we get marching on. Today we are going to talk about racing, and we're going to talk about racing on flat terrain, perhaps the most famous race, Ironman Florida, but there are many other races, as many of the Ironman and half Ironman races are built around racing tracks that are very, very accessible to athletes. So we're going to talk about the personality and the execution and the things to think about when we're talking about flat terrain. That's going to be our number one mission today. I do think that this week, when you get your coach's bulletin, which is coming out on Thursday, I'd highly recommend a read. We talk about a young upstart this week and the journey from a wannabe pro athlete up to getting second this last weekend at a escape triathlon in Philadelphia. And the reason I talk about Cecilia, who actually is joining us live, I just realized, but the reason I talk about Cecilia was the progression and the mindset that was necessary for her to even be mildly competitive at the professional level, and how she went through the process over the last 6 to 9 months. And I think it's really applicable, because I think that what's special about Cecilia, or makes her shine for me a little bit, is her mental application and actually taking the information and translating it into what's appropriate for her, and then full-bloodedly committing herself to the process of self-improvement. And it doesn't matter that she's gone from age group and racing pro. I think it's a really nice story at the most basic level of how to achieve your own performance, and really what Paul and I look for when we look into any athlete and helping for self-improvement. So Cecilia, a little tip of the hat and a great result this weekend. Now, let's move forward. Let's talk about racing in flat terrain, and that's going to be our main topic today. I started with my notes saying the mission of flat terrain, when we are forced to ride on a course without personality, which are not very favorable for Paul and myself, but when we do race on courses without personality, we must find variability where only a little exists. And the truth is, as we talk about this, if you are going to go and race, particularly a half Ironman or an Ironman, those races are too long for any athlete to be able to sit in a single place, at a single cadence, at a single effort, without there being negative consequences, without there being a certain amount of neuromuscular and muscular fatigue that will negatively impact the latter part of the bike ride, or certainly the run performance, without it creating a whole bunch of stress on the system and postural stress on the system. So yes, we must find variability where it exists. So Paul, why don't you talk about, come through, and for this case, we're gonna jump rope, we're gonna leap ahead on the swim. We're gonna go right into the bike here, because the two main features of this are biking and running. Swimming on a flat surface, okay, great, I think everyone gets it. Let's talk about biking, and let's talk about, firstly, the primary sports, or primary sources of speed on a flat course.
Well, the primary mechanical factors for generating speed on a flat course are aerodynamics and rolling resistance. And within triathlon media, there is a vast amount of information on both of those things. So things that we need to attend to in that regard is, when you go to a flat course where the variation and how you use your physical resources, the opportunities are less to make a difference because there is less variability. Those key mechanical factors become quite important. You know, if you can get a better return on investment by having a better aerodynamic situation and having lower rolling resistance, that's a very, very good place to start. And that's a prior preparation and planning thing. You should be constantly thinking about evolving your interaction with the bike to be in the most aerodynamic situation. And as resources become available, you should be mindful of choosing equipment that maximizes benefit. So, you know, we don't need to talk too much about wheels and tires and so on, but know that they are on a flat course. They will be an obvious contributing factor to speed over distance.
Paul,
along with that, we have our physical components that we need to think about on the bicycle, and broadly that would be pedaling dynamics, consistency of effort and tension, and don't take that as doing the same thing all the time, but making sure that there is no lapses in concentration where the contributing factors as far as your output start making a big difference when on a course with little variation. One of the things that happens is it's very easy to drift off, and then over a few seconds here and a few seconds there and a few seconds there over the course of your event starts making a big difference. And then the final sort of physical component would be resilience, in that this thing that Matt talked about a little bit about introducing variation to a course that has very little is an important factor, because some of these courses with very little variation, you just get worn down by the sameness of it. So there is no way of on a flat course or one with very little variation of having as much difference in your physical input as there would be on a hilly or a rolling course, but and that has a wear you down sort of effect. And I mean, if you take that back to where we started, we avoid in a lot of our training going out and doing a long run on a hard surface with very little variation, because it has a negative effect on the amount of fatigue that you get out of that session. So we have to consider all those things when we go into a course that potentially has little variation. We have to consider best equipment, we have to consider best preparation, and then go about looking for the ways of maximizing all of those factors and looking for ways of introducing variation.
And we'll talk about the variation opportunities. Let me go back very briefly. If you can mute Paul for me. Let me go back to equipment really quickly, and let me ask you a question, Paul, because I think boiling down without diving into, and there he goes, he's disappeared, so that doesn't really help. I will ask the equipment selection from Paul in a second. He's obviously lost it. I want to ask his opinion over the best opportunity for time savings as it comes to equipment choices, and how should we actually categorize them. I'd like to hear Paul's opinion on that, whether it's helmet, whether it's wheels. And here he comes back, so hopefully we can ask him that. Are you back with us, Paulie?
I'm not sure here, but blank.
Okay. My question for you, Paul, was going to be around equipment. Just coming back very, very briefly without doing a deep dive. If people are interested, beyond obviously the position side of things, if they are looking for the places to maybe have the best speed return on equipment choice, where would you put the hierarchy without going into any more details? Would it be around wheels? Would it be around helmet choice? Would it be about position on bike? Would it be around anything else? Where is the quick and dirty, hey, these are the areas to really look at on a flat course where aerodynamics does have a bigger yield than really lumpy courses? Where's the best place to look for speed advantage for these guys?
Primarily position. That's by far the biggest factor, that you are the biggest, lump to push through the air of, the bicycle rider scenario. So the frontal area and the wind resistance of the rider is significantly more than anything you bolt onto the bicycle. So that's the primary thing. So that's about, there's a couple of factors there. Is within the interaction parts of it, the cockpit area, tidying up your drink systems and so on is important, and how much stuff you hang all over your bicycle. That's just keeping everything clean and having a good position. as much of that position thing as you thinking about how to maintain that position. So do the preparation work of, you know, developing good posture, good resilience, pedaling dynamics in your best aerodynamic position. That's by far the most important thing. That's where you spend your resources first. After that, the next thing is your wheel and tire combination, because it's stuff that's moving through the air. But everything has an effect as well. You know, the simple thing about just tidying up your clothing, having cycling clothing that's flapping in the air is, you know, it's a major contributor. People who stuff a whole bunch of stuff in their pockets, they have a fantastic position, and then they've got these pockets like, you know, hanging out the back of their back, you know, dragging, you know, a whole bunch of wind behind them. So it's there's no one-stop shop. Position, cockpit area of the bicycle would be the primary thing, and then would be attending to wheel and tire combo, and just generally the cleanliness of your setup as far as clothing and how you store your equipment.
And that becomes obviously really important, because we're talking about two things here. The first that we'll go into in a second is talking about trying to create variance. And you're going to be spending a lot of time in your aerodynamic position. So we're looking to gain every advantage we can from aerodynamics, making yourself as aerodynamic. At the same time, it has to be sustainable. And while you're sitting down in that position, they have to. So even before we're going into racing, there is a training element of developing postural fitness, and spending a long time down in that position, and your actual position have to be sustainable. And it is that constant balance to find it there. So I guess that leads us then into, okay, so we're going to look on this bike ride where we're going to spend a greater percentage of our time in our most aerodynamic position that we can. Where are the avenues? Where are the opportunities to find variance? And in my mind, there's obviously the wind, because you've got a headwind that's going to apply a little load, or a tailwind that's going to reduce load. You've maybe got overpasses and things like that, small bridges that often happen in areas like Florida or South Carolina, that you might have some overpasses. You've got aid stations where you're forced to slow down, you're forced to accelerate, an opportunity for acceleration. You've got turns to navigate through. You've got your use of gears, therefore applying to cadence. So why don't we talk about some ways to introduce variance to try and maximize speed while developing variance in there. And I'll start with my very basic thing, Paul, which is, if nothing else, every X number of minutes, every 10 to 15 minutes, there has to be some form of shift of load. So if you have an athlete, the worst thing if they go to Ironman Florida, if they remember nothing else, don't spend 95 miles of your 112 miles of a bike ride in the same cadence down in aero position, because you will come off and you will run still in aero position. So at least having the most basic cue to say, every 10 to 15 minutes, I'm going to shift the load and somehow or another probably stand up, stretch and regain position. But of course it goes deeper than that. That's a very basic level. So why don't we go in and why don't we talk just really briefly about each one of those things, wind, plus obviously with head and tailwind, use of gears, things like aid stations. Why don't you give us just a couple of minutes on that?
That comes back to the planning aspect. You know, you go into this course, what you're looking for when you look up in sight, you know the course. And on a course like that, you want to go into it with an idea of, yes, there is this turn, there is that aid station, and have a protocol for managing it. And it might just be that, okay, between the first 20 miles, there's 3 corners, and you're going to say, when I get to those corners, I'm going to have a protocol for standing up and accelerating away from the corner and relieving a little bit of the postural stress, changing the load on the muscles a little bit as well. So you want to have a planning element for a start off as well, because most of these races, you don't want to go in and make it up as you go along. You know, it's you want to have an idea, and then it's more likely to happen. You won't get everything right for the entire duration of a 90k bike ride or a 180k bike ride. There will be things that you thought you were going to do, that you planned to do, that you will miss. But you will certainly miss a hell of a lot more of them if you have no plan going in. So it's knowing that, you know, this is the way the wind's going to blow. These are the things that I need to consider. This is an aid station. I'm going to slow down from my aid station. I'm going to take my bottle. I'm going to stand up, accelerate, compress the time it takes me to get back to racing speed, but also add a little bit of variation. And then within that plan, like any other plan, there needs to be a degree of flexibility, because the things that you thought might be going to happen may not actually occur. So you need to be able to manage those situations as well. The wind's blowing in a different direction. The way that the race unfolds, you know, it's a cooler day and you don't need to stop at as many aid stations. You know, all those things you need to be able to have a little bit of flexibility with your plan, but you want to go in with a plan that, as Matt said, if you've gone a half an hour doing a thing and there's been no variation, you probably want to think about, I need to relieve some postural stress now.
Can we do one thing that I think is very basic but very important? Athlete riding along in time trial position, they want to relieve postural stress. They want to actually take some of their lower back is starting to hurt. Mechanically on the bike, and I don't expect you to stand up and dancing around the room to show, but what's the actual protocol to actually, what's the best way to relieve some of the postural stress if their shoulders are tight, if their lower back's tight? What's the protocol they should go through? Add a couple of gears, stand up, maybe push the hips forward, rotate. So I'm not sure many people know how to actually try and loosen up the back while obviously in flight without stopping.
Well, before you get to the cure part of it, part of the prevention is that, you know, you've worked on developing this resilience and so on in training, and you've also worked on an awareness of how long you can go doing a certain thing before you start getting fatigued or whatever. So that checklist, that basic checklist from the tips of your fingers to the tips of your toes, is the thing that you want to be mindful of when you're riding. It's, you know, are my hands relaxed? Am I sitting in the correct, you know, position as far as where my elbows are on the armrests, so as I haven't, it gives you an awareness of whether you've made any subconscious position adjustments that will have a negative effect. You know, am I using the appropriate, you know, managing the course protocols of dropping my head down, looking through the top of my eyes, etc., etc. Am I sitting in the correct part of the saddle? Am I pedaling dynamics good? Those things will help prevent the onset of that postural stress. But even so, you want to be at a place where that, if you're riding along at a modest, you know, race, you know, variable of cadence, where that might be for you somewhere between 80 and 90 RPM or 75 and 85 RPM, if you want to stand up, you generally, and to relieve some postural tension, it's generally 2 gears given the load that you're doing. So when you stand up, you don't just sink through the pedal stroke. So it's 2 gears, maybe left hand to the, if you haven't got electronic shifting, it's left hand to the base bar, 2 harder gears, right hand to the base bar, rise out of the saddle. And then when you rise out of the saddle, it's still, you know, relaxed upper body, no weight on the hands, the weight is on the pedals. And then once you've got the bike moving like that, then you can start consciously adding a little bit of those, you know, relief of postural tension. You can drop the heels down a little bit to stretch out the calves. You can sit up a little bit and actually consciously do a thing that you wouldn't normally do, is stretch out, you know, put a little bit of tension into the shoulders and so on. And then you can hyperextend the back, and by raising the shoulders up a little bit, hyperextend the back, and then lower yourself back down into the aerodynamic position. It's not like you're riding along for 100 meters doing this. The whole thing is done and dusted in the space of, you know, somewhere between, you know, 5 and 20 pedal strokes. And then you're back into your work. And it's just a great way, that little bit of variation. If you can do it at a corner, at an aid station, over a little, like overpass or whatever, that's all that much better, because you're going to be using a tool that gives you benefit on course as well as relieving postural stress. So But if those variations don't exist, and you find that that tension has built up, just go through the protocol. It may have a slight negative effect on aerodynamic situation right now, but as a overall situation for the whole race scenario, it will certainly have a positive effect.
Well, that's it, isn't it? I mean, it's the big picture game that you're always playing, and going through with these little micro moments of, oh my goodness, I've lost, a second or two because of that. But if you can arrive at the end of the bike ride, obviously having ridden pretty fast, because it will be a pretty fast course relative to whatever your performance is, but you come off and are able to retain posture in the last 20, 30, 40, 50k of the bike ride, and or obviously, or hopefully can actually run with great posture off the bike. That's really important. And with that, let's move to the run. So, yeah, go ahead, Paul.
Before we go, one other thing with the relieving of the postural stress and so on, it has the truck and trailer effect that we mentioned, that one of the things that happens that to pull the speed out of your ride over a course with little variation is the fact that you lose concentration. Because you're doing the same thing over and over and over again, efficiency and pedaling dynamics and so on starts declining, because you're just doing the same thing and you're not thinking about it all the time. By going through the little postural reset, it also goes through a little bit of reset. When you get back down to doing your work, you should be doing it well. So, you reset, you relieve postural stress, but you also have a little reset of efficiency, resilience, tension, etc. So, yeah, it's important.
I think we spend too much time with each other, because as you were talking originally, I said I must mention it's a reset emotionally as well as it is physically, and then I bypassed it straight away. So thank you, because you brought me back to exactly the point. We'll move to running. Mechanical fatigue. I think that in a course like this, the biggest demon of the flat course, it's a fast running course. How many times have we seen dead flat courses be the undoing of athletes, and athletes being able to run so much faster with courses with just a little bit of variance? And that lack of variation is a massive factor on mechanical fatigue. So let's go through and sort of talk about, both in training and racing, that factor, and let's dive in. I'll let you dive in first to the keys to execution on this. One of the most important things that we can do to try and not find variation yet, but some of the keys to execution of that course forward.
That comes back to that thing we talked about a little bit before too, with preparation, is you want to have a look at a course and start thinking about, what's the surface that I'm going to run on? Is that going, if the surface is primarily concrete, you may choose a different running shoe than you would if it had a mixture of, gravel pathways and, springy hot mix surface and so on. So there's a little bit of preparation thing to go into it as well. Don't think that just because it's a flat course, as Matt said, that it's going to be a fast course. You may have other factors, heat and wind, and the fact that the surface itself might lead to a increased rate of mechanical fatigue, because it makes a big difference the surface you're running on. In the same way as we encourage most people to do their longest runs on a soft surface to reduce the residual effect, the same thing happens. You get a flat course that's got a hard, unforgiving surface. It tends to break people down. There is that fact that the running surface is tough on the body, but the other thing that comes into it is that same thing we hark back to: the lack of variation will wear you down. So you need to have protocols going in. And interestingly, we have people who the walk break is an essential way of managing gradient versus their potential physical output on a hilly course. The walk break is a fantastic way of resetting on a course with very little variation as well.
And you can run very, very fast with integrated walk breaks globally, whatever your train potential is. I mean, It is, people always see it as a sign of weakness. I've said it many, many times before, but even on a flat course, it absolutely has application. And I think that the biggest thing that we see with athletes when they're running on a flat course, as they start to decline, there's no other place that you tend to see the postural decline start to occur. And you can see the mechanical limitations, and most often created from, for lack of a better phrase, their quads being bashed to pieces. And being able to actually retain as much of the run as possible, standing tall, with the body in front or with the shoulders in front of the hips, making sure that you can retain leg speed is a really challenging thing on a flat course, and that's how we have to do it. It's okay for athletes to actually vary leg speed a little bit and to go through, and similar to when they're riding and you know that it's really, really challenging to just sit at one cadence and ride the whole of the bike course. We know that it's the same in running as well. And if you're feeling flat, if you're feeling like you're getting into that loping, sludge driven run, lift it up a little bit, go a little bit stride length, pick up the leg speed, or even lengthen it out for a little bit and try and introduce variance. Of course, you get to do that coming in and out of turns, coming in and out of aid stations a little bit, integrating foot brakes in a really strategic way. But I think it's a really smart way to actually try and deliver variance, especially when you're going through that physical decline that occurs. And I think in flat courses as well, and there's no worse place than just seeing the horizon, those long runs that are flat, where it almost in both directions, it looks like you're going slightly uphill because it's so dead flat. That's the place, Paul, where there's we talk about in riding, the loss of posture, the loss of riding well. I think that occurs in the run just as much, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely. And it's that same thing. There's so much potential for so much sameness in it that people don't realize the subtle incremental decline. And it's if you're running a marathon at the end of an Ironman, if you get 15 miles into it and realize that decline has occurred and there has been a greater than necessary loss of speed over time, it's a bloody hard thing to get back then. It's not impossible, but it's hard to get back. So that little bit of variation, and as Matt said, it could be just at a turnaround, a U-turn around a cone or a corner, of just thinking, I'm going to accelerate out of the corner, not to a ridiculous speed, but accelerate out of the corner to reintroduce some form, some posterior activation, and just to stop that subtle decline that happens with a lot of sameness in your running.
It's funny how so many athletes, the lack of awareness that comes with that, and there is the saying, if something's not working, change it. And yet, in an Ironman particularly, when something's not working, so many athletes just fall into decline and they just keep doing the same thing, and it's getting worse and worse and worse and worse. And of course, then cost is going up and up and up at this, trying to sustain the same level, and something breaks. And usually, it's the ability to maintain that speed, and boom, emotionally people go. If something's not working, change it. If you don't like the rhythm that you're in, change it. And you have to find ways to do that. And find ways to do that on a flat course is less intuitive than a rolling course. So therefore you have to think through it and work through it as much, and I would say if not more, than a course that delivers variance. The final thing I'd say, and giving you the last word in a second, Paul, but the one final thing I'd say with the sameness, the lack of variability, it is stunning on a course like that. You would think with the noise of terrain, the noise of features of weather and other factors like that, that people would forget to do some of the basics. But the sameness is the thing where people just fall away and focus. And so the aspects of the nutrition plan, the fueling plan, it's at quite a risk of being a casualty of focus as well. People fall into daydreaming on flat courses, and it's not unreasonable, it's not uncommon for athletes to completely forget about their fueling and hydration protocol. So just a word at the end from me, don't forget it. If anything, the flat courses are the ones that it might be to have whatever it is, the buzzer on the watch to try and reset, make sure that you've got your fueling and hydration going. Same as changing postural stress, have an emotional reset at the same time. So my last words on the flat course is that. Any last words on flat, Paulie?
No, it's I was out the other day generating some numbers based on, you know, that drift and efficiency and pedaling dynamics based on cadence and wind and so on. And it's we'll put together some education on it just to put some numbers to the idea, but there is a significant difference over time if you drift away and you stop doing what you're doing well. And the perceived level of effort might be very, very much the same, but that concentration thing, that staying in the game when work is not obviously given to you or variation is not obviously given to you, it's extremely important.
Good stuff. Any questions that folks have on particularly first on racing or racing on flat terrain? If not, we'll dance our way towards global. Well, why don't we start with someone charming? Steve, that's not you. Eileen. I think Eileen has frozen potentially. Let's go to Steve. He's good looking.
Not a lot of questions on my end. Paul and I have been working through some sort of mid-season fatigue, you might say, and I'm about to head to some altitude in Colorado, hoping to reset my batteries a little bit there. But it's all good. Still doing lots of swimming with no watch, Matt. Thanks to you.
I'm sure you guys are working it out, but I'm assuming that there's an opportunity to take a real turn your back on the sport and have a real break component, which will be my very strong recommendation at some time. So I haven't spoken to Paul about you for about 10 days.
But just, it's an important thing for everybody too. It's you know, we've had a busy start to the season, and Steve's been unlucky enough to be one of my guinea pigs, so he's had a harder start to the season than some people. But lately, it's been extremely obvious that stress from work and life and the fatigue that comes from that is just as important as the stress that comes from training as to how you feel. And Steve might be a bit of an energizer bunny, being able to leap up at dark 100 every morning and bang out some good quality training, but eventually quality and quantity of sleep will be a major factor in how you feel and what effect the workload has on you.
And it's really important. I mean, you can realize because some of the people that we've written about in the last couple of weeks, Kevin Collington, we just did a piece about his journey and his progression. And a couple of weeks before that, Sam Appleton. This week, I've written a little piece around Cecilia Davis-Hayes, who's on the call today. All of these athletes that have had fantastic starts to the season, some really good results. Kevin just spent the last week in Mexico not doing any exercise whatsoever. Sam's got till Racine, which is, when's that, July 16th or so, so he's got a couple of weeks to go. And then he's going to turn his back 8 weeks before Worlds, so 2 months before Worlds. He'll go and do absolutely, well, very, very little activity. He's booked a place, a little cabin with no connection at all for 3 days in Aspen. He'll probably go and hike. And then he'll spend the rest of the week just swimming 2K, doing nothing, no real structured training. Cecilia, the same thing, got New York Triathlon, had a busy race schedule, had a wonderful start to the year, wants to have a great back end of the year after New York. We'll do a week to 10 days of very, very little training. It's important to rejuvenate, and in that time, turn your back on the sport, sleep, as Paul said, so don't fill it with other time. Eat healthy, stay active, but really allow yourself that rejuvenation and let the batteries recharge. And it's a really, really valuable side. Sarah Piampiano, who was just second at Cairns, she was just away for the last 10 days to 2 weeks, with much of the time in Maine. Didn't speak to her for 8 days, and went to Maine and swam a little open water in lakes and hiked a little bit, did very little. Lovely time. Now, okay, let's get ready for Kona. But you restart again with a little decline of feeling of fitness, but very, very quickly right back up. You're not going back and redoing all of postseason. It comes back very, very quickly, and it's the best thing that you can possibly do. Nicole.
So all this talk about flat courses has me thinking about the fact that I really plan on buying a TT bike sometime in the next few months. And I'm just wondering if you have any advice on what to look for, how to think about that, so that you make sure you get, you know, a frame that's a good fit for your body.
I'll give you advice on that. I'll give you the first headline news first is, and I'm going to do an unashamed sell on you here, Nicole. But the first thing, do not go out and buy a super bike. So even if you had all the money in the world, do not go out and buy a really complicated super bike, unless you would like to also go out and buy a personal mechanic to travel with you to every single race every time you fight that. It's not worth it. You can buy a wonderful bike that's fixed, that's sturdy, that's really good, that does everything that you want to do to have a wonderful experience in the sport and set of results. You're dead right. You want to get the right bike for you. And time trial bikes are not all built the same. There are a lot of really good bikes, but there is a family of bikes that are probably better suited for you than maybe a different family of bikes. And so if we can see you riding on your road bike, we can really give you some good instruction. I would buy some time with Paul to have a conversation and go through piece by piece, and Paul at the end of the day, who is completely objective without any affiliation to any bike company whatsoever, will say, these are the 2 or 3 bikes, this is the size you want, this is how to equip it, and here are some good options for you. So that you can, and the first thing he will say before he gives you the options is make sure you buy a bike that you love, because you're going to ride it and going to spend a long period of time. So that's another important factor. You have to like how it looks, you have to like the reaction that it gives you, and you want to ride your bike when you go look at it. That's one important thing. But then it has to be suitable for you. So it's a big project, but it is the best investment. We have a very good athlete locally here who I gave the same advice to, and she decided she didn't want to do it. She went and bought a bike. She got sold the wrong size. She had to try and sell it after 6 months of being uncomfortable. She went and bought another bike, and she went to a local bike fitter to get her bike fit, who's not a great expert, and she got her bike fit poorly, and now I have to look at it every time I see her in bike class. And I said to her, please, whatever we need to do, just come to my garage. I just cannot look, because the retina surgery that I have to have to try and fix your position is not worth us paying. So it was, unfortunately, she's a lovely, lovely woman. It was penny wise and pound foolish. So I really think it is the best investment to spend. Paul won't tell you that, or can't tell you that. I can tell you that, and I say that unashamedly. That is the best best thing to do.
No, I mean, I think that makes sense. So that's helpful. 30
to 60 minutes of time. Steve has done the same thing. It's really high value. Let's go to Kathleen.
Hey there. So I am making my way through the return to running protocol. I missed about 2 months of running. I'm up to 60 minutes now with walk breaks. I'm taking every 5 minutes, 30-second walk breaks. just playing it safe, I guess.
Yeah.
And the 2 months that I missed the strength loops and, a lot of the strength-based running. And I'm just kind of trying to figure out, as I come off the return to running protocol, what do I do? Do I head into the race specific where we are, or should I loop back and do some of the strength-based runs that we had done in April?
You know what I would do this season for you, globally? I would put 90% of my emphasis, nearly all of my emphasis on creating consistent running. So most of your running, I think, until you can really build up for 2 or 3 months, is about consistency, steady, safely doing some building efforts to get the majority of your cardiovascular conditioning and interval-based training on the swim and bike. And I would actually go through almost the whole of the phase of these upcoming 3 months saying, I'm going to be overly cautious on the run. I'm going to go through and I'm just going to create consistency on that and build total duration, total frequency, really get resilient and robust, find the recipe that works for me. Yeah, do some building efforts, but I wouldn't get to running and then go back and do strength. I think it's too high of a risk. Just double down and say, you know what, in this opportunity, let's do it. Let's keep the run really consistent. But I'm going to really load the swim and the bike, and out of that, when I come out of race specific, I want to be a better swimmer, better biker, and let's see what the run does. And I think you'll be surprised anyway. But the most important thing is, just by creating consistency, it's probably a safer way to go with where you're at in the season and the injury you went through.
Okay, great, thank you.
Really good.
As Matt said there, you're going to be a better swimmer and a better biker. Your whole focus, aside from building that consistency, is to be a better runner. You've had a couple of months off. You get to reinvent your run. You get to, over the next period of time, your focus should be about getting to be able to run freely and so on. But at the end of it, you should look at yourself and go, I am a better runner than I was before. Because, some of your limitations in your run before were based on the, injuries and things that you had to manage. But as you come back into running, you want to get to the end of this next couple of months and go, I'm a better runner now than I was before. Doesn't matter about faster or stronger yet, but be a better runner.
Okay.
Sorry, Kathleen, go ahead.
Oh.
Your next door neighbor in swimming, Sarah Piampiano, great example. When she broke her femur, you'll probably remember that she went through, and that was her number one objective, was as I'm coming back, I'm going to get strong, I'm going to fix the things that are my weakness, and I'm going to run really, really well. And one of the things that she really focused on as she was coming back was taking out some of the bounce out of her run. She was a very pretty biomechanical runner, but she almost looked like she was running on a pogo stick, and we wanted to get it going this way, and she did really embrace that. It's not a finished journey. We still wanted to get lower off the ground a little bit, but it's a really good opportunity. Paul's striking gold on that.
Okay, great, thank you.
We'll go along the line. Jordan, I haven't asked how your race is, but I'll ask you that tomorrow morning. We can talk about it. I saw it.
Actually, I did want to talk about that because I feel so I raced yesterday in Coeur d'Alene, just felt off all day, like no energy. Even on the swim, I didn't feel like I was pushing. I was just like going through the motions. And so my swim was fine, my bike was fine, but I just and then by the time I hit the run, I just lacked energy. Like I just had no spring. And in contrast to even Alcatraz 2 weeks ago, and then Santa Rosa before that, where I got off the bike and I was running. Yesterday I got off the bike and felt like I was just surviving.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure what's changed necessarily.
I don't know if anything's changed. I was going to ask you how tired you feel mentally and physically with the grind. I mean, you had a break after South Africa you went on, but I'm wondering whether we need another clean out before we go hammer and tongs for.
Oh, for sure. And like this week through July 4th is definitely all about just not non-structured training. I mean, I'll take my bike down to LA and San Diego, but it's my road bike and it's to do fun things with friends and not train per se.
Someone's going to say something.
It's good that the seat thing didn't impact the race, Jordan, but and interesting hearing that you said you had no energy. That would explain the little lie down you had in T2, without which you would have won the race.
So the other thing is, and I didn't want to bring it up in this call, is I trying to fix stomach issues and I had them again. So yeah, I went to the bathroom in T2 and I went to the bathroom 2 times on the run. So I really ran a 1:47 and should have won by 3 minutes versus losing by 14 seconds.
Yeah, and the minute or so in T2 was the
that was the deciding one, because my T1 was faster. My run was a little slower, but should have been a little closer.
Which and not that I wanted to pick on Jordan at all, but it's a reminder that as we go through the season and everything evolves, we still have to do the basics. And one of the things that we do in the basics and people forget about is on those days when you have a brick session, practice your transition. On days when you have a low stress day or whatever, and if you've looked at people passing you in T1 or T2, set yourself up a little transition and have a practice, because it's part of racecraft. And in this particular case, Jordan had some other factors that she had to deal with, which contributed to that. But if you're one of those people who loses time in transition, go practice your transitions.
I agree 100%. I'm also going to support Jordan in this, that when she's in the portal, we can't attack her. But so I agree 100%, and I'm going to stick up for Jordan as well.
It's funny because my mantra. So talking to my husband pre-race, I coach my husband, and I asked him what his pre-race mantra was, and he asked me back. I was like, okay, tomorrow every second counts. So I think it's ironic that I lost by seconds.
Yeah. I mean, it was a good race, but on that note, what the hell was Rich doing on the run?
And the swim. So, but he had a great bike, but he also got a penalty. So I think the penalty probably impacted him mentally. So it is the first out of 3 races he has completed this year, so small victories.
It is. I would call that a coaching victory, not going to hit your athlete, not getting disqualified. Well, let's talk about it offline a little bit, so we don't lose. Cecilia, any questions today? Or are you just coming here bathing in your glory of getting your first professional podium?
Well, no, still a lot to learn. So I appreciated that. I guess I have a question about, it kind of relates to the flat and flatness on the run and change and variation. So a lot of triathlon courses seem to have a turnaround to cone. And I feel like I sometimes lose time to people inexplicably around those cones. Maybe sometimes inexplicably gain time. I'm not really sure what I do right or what I do wrong, but I've tried many strategies, like slowing down a little bit before the cone, speeding up before the cone, taking the really quick inside line and just whipping around. I've tried that like funny skip flip turn thing that some cool kids do. And and I haven't got a strategy down. And yesterday there was like 10 turns around a cone. And so speak to me on running around a cone.
Well, Paul, I'll let you do it, but I'll say, Cecilia, with you're much better now that we've got your long dangly bits tidy and actually running with a little form, because now that you're not spring like that, it's better. Paulie? It's
as you train, so shall you race thing. You need to practice those things in that environment. And you watch those ITU people who are going around those corners all the time. You'll watch people run, and based on the corner, you'll watch them take that one pace past the corner and basically lean back into it. And you'll watch, those guys running around the corners and they're leaned over like this on a cone going back the other way. And then others you'll see them all head towards if it's a left shoulder turn, you'll see them all head towards the outside and then cut back in on the corner. So they start accelerating back through the corner. And it's just a matter of figuring out, you know, the entry and the exit and the best way around it, the amount of room you've got to minimize the deceleration, you know, and the period it takes you to get back up to running speed. And it's the same as learning it on the bike, and you'll watch those people doing it, but you need to go and practice when you're training. Do that thing of running up to a corner and then just, you know, take the inside line and lean into it and accelerate quickly out. And if you don't practice, it won't happen. I guess it's a pretty hard thing to describe in this environment, other than you need to start thinking about, you know, entry speed, amount of room you've got, and exit speed, and figuring and playing with some different protocols for doing it.
Okay.
True. All right, any last questions before we pull the parachute? All right, we pull the parachute. Daddy knows best. Good stuff, guys. We will we are gonna do a little refresh on hilly courses on Thursday, and we'll be up on alert and we'll be ready to go properly for that one. All right, guys, have a great week, and see you tomorrow.